14 years in this room. The last 5 seemed like 20. On a cool September morning, Richard Rawlings stood in that courthouse with that cocky grin that people knew from Fast and the Least. Something changed, though, as the judge read the sentence. His knees gave out. The man who made a fortune by selling Mustangs and talking about million-dollar deals fell to the ground and grabbed the rail as cameras clicked. As it turned out, the king of cars had built his kingdom on something less good. The truth was so bad that it shut down a courtroom full of people. Guards came in and led Rawlings away while people looked down. The most trusted car guy in America was wanted more than ever on this day. But how did Richard Rawlings go from being a hero to being put in jail? The most important car. The Texas sun was already very hot. When Richard Rawlings went into an old garage on a quiet street and looked at the dusty car frames and broken windshields as if they were gold ready to be found. This was the start of Gas Monkey Garage. If you watched Fast and Loud, you may remember Rawlings comfortably leaned over engines, making deals on the phone while his team worked quickly to finish builds. It was kind of like the American dream come true. Rock music played in the background as the video was shot in HD. I didn't get any seat time. We finished our car at the same time as you. Richard, who was born in 1969, started flipping cars a long time before TV teams started following him around. He said he had sold a lot of them, enough to start a bar, a restaurant, and then a live music venue, and that he had built a small kingdom that smelled like barbecue and motor oil. Fast and Loud came out in 2012. It drew people in for 8 years who wanted to see Richard shake hands, light cigars, and speed off in a way that would wake the block up. The sales went for figures. At its peak, Fast and Loud was one of the most watched car shows on the Discovery Channel. Each episode drew millions of watchers, and Richard became well known to people who didn't even like cars, but loved how it felt to win. Richard was great at the part. He wore flashy shirts, drove classic Mustangs to meetings, and called himself the king of cars with a grin that made it look like he could get away with it. He did in a lot of ways. Gas Monkey Garage grew. People cheering for Richard at car shows and jets were all over his Instagram, and Gas Monkey-themed shops opened up in several places, offering everything from merchandise to beer. He worked with Dodge, went to SEMA, and became the face of the current American hustle to flip cars. People thought that if they worked hard and moved quickly, they could live like this too. Even though his team worked long hours behind the scenes, Richard made flipping cars and drinking beer look like a great way to live. In the show, people were often rushed to meet goals. But did you know Richard Rawlings well? You saw him give his staff high fives, make last-minute deals, and have parties in the shop. But that TV image wasn't nearly as shiny in real life. When you look at Richard's life after Fast and Loud finished in 2020, you can see that his empire had some hard times. The Gas Monkey Bar and Grill is no longer open. The brand's energy slowed down, and fans noticed that Richard's attention shifted from the garage to new projects that didn't always go well. Launched a YouTube page, worked on car projects that didn't have the same high-stakes energy as the TV show, and tried to keep the brand alive. Richard was still there, flipping and talking loud, but there was no longer any fast and loud noise. And with it, the soft glow that stopped people from criticizing. People began to wonder how much of Fast and Chew Loud was based on real events, how deals were made, and whether the cars that were built quickly for filming were really as strong as they looked in the studio. Forums started to hear rumors about unpaid bills and tough business calls. Richard's image as the king of cars who could not be stopped started to crack. That brings us back to the story that Richard had been jailed for a Mustang scandal that spread like wildfire on late-night TikToks and YouTube shorts. A story that never happened but seemed real because over time, the difference between his cocky TV persona and the problems he faced behind the brand became less clear. Richard Rawlings gave up on his dream of turning rust into gold. But the truth is that business in the car world is a lot more complex. Tax bills, harsh numbers, and formal paperwork that don't make for good TV. But how did the internet make the most wanted car guy in America the most trusted? The truth is that this perfect front began to fall apart with something as easy as a tax audit, and what that audit found would bring up questions that the camera crew couldn't get rid of. The falling apart. A simple tax check was the first thing that showed that this perfect front wasn't so perfect after all. An IRS official opened a folder in the spring of 2023 that had Richard Rawlings' name on it. They were expecting to do another routine check of the books of a famous businessman. The face of Rawlings, who everyone knew from Fast and Loud, was made up of big wins all the time. I don't have a license to drag race, and to get in a car with 3,000 horsepower that you haven't driven on a track or in a car seat before, and parties where everyone is yelling for Gas Monkey Garage. But the numbers didn't match up with the way of life. It looked like the cost line for restoration parts was too clean, and the VIN on the papers for a custom Mustang sale was off. At first, it looked like a mistake, one letter wrong or a number going the wrong way. But when the police officer checked the VIN against government databases, the record came back blank, and the system showed that it didn't exist. It wasn't just a mistake on the papers. The VIN number in question was linked to a car that didn't really exist. The car was painted a bright metallic blue and shown off as a rare Mustang build. It was driven to car shows where crowds gathered for pictures and shared on social media with captions praising a six-figure flip. Fans thought they saw Richard behind the wheel, revving the engine, smiling for the camera, and saying that this was the car that would break all sale records. But behind the scenes, the IRS started talking to the State Vehicle and Department of Transportation to double-check Richard's business. The more they looked, the more problems they found. For example, sales records and repair claims did not match up. There were no records for cars that should have had emissions tests or registration fees, and parts costs that were claimed as business deductions did not have papers that matched the bills that were shown on his channels. One of Rawlings' YouTube videos, which was a casual walk of the shop, showed that Mustang sitting under bright shop lights, looking shiny and clean. Richard laughed with his crew in the background as they looked at engine parts and talked about the next job. But when the police paused the video and looked at the VIN plate that could be seen in the frame, it didn't match up with any restoration papers that was filed with Texas records. What they found next would surprise even the most experienced detectives. A deeper dive showed that the car may have been made from a shell that was found elsewhere. Even so, the paperwork was turned in under a different name, which got around the fees and checks that a real high-value build would have had to go through. This Mustang, which was once a big deal on Richard's social media sites, became the thing that started to pull everything apart. In a quiet move, the IRS began a federal investigation into possible tax fraud. They are focused on business deductions filed under gas monkey holdings, show-related merchandise sales, and income from foreign appearances that may not have been properly reported. More doubts were made about the accuracy of customs and export declarations when a money trail was found connecting restored cars to auctions in other countries and private collectors who bought them. Rawlings had said for years that he sold hundreds of cars every year, but the audit showed that some of those sales did not have the necessary paperwork, which is against federal law. Investigators looked into every sale, move, and social media post that showed a car with a clear plate or VIN tag. They did this behind closed doors. To do this, they compared timestamps on clips from Fast and Loud shows on YouTube and even Instagram Reels with those on invoices that Richard's businesses sent to the IRS. What began as a simple review of tax returns turned into a full-scale federal investigation. Agents went to auctions, talked to former buyers, and looked at records that Richard probably thought would never be seen again. The man who became famous for turning rust into gold had to deal with a new world where every detail was important and every lost ticket could mean a charge. The king of cars, the person who fans trusted to give builds on, came. While telling jokes and starting cigars, was being watched by the federal government. The Mustang with the fake VIN became a sign of a system that was beginning to fall apart from the inside. For what reason did Rawlings' closest friends and family not see what was behind those locked doors? The hidden power. We can't find what we're looking for in the online vids. It was hidden in a place that the Gas Monkey staff used to call the cage. Most people who came to the Dallas warehouse thought it was just another parts storage area because it was stacked with old panels, crates of carburetors, and boxes with handwriting tags on them. But investigators later said they found what they called a small industrial-grade forgery lab behind a fake wall. The investigation that began with a single fake VIN led the police to this secret room. On a hot morning, they broke in with a warrant and pushed past racks of dusty rims and broken floor tiles until they got to a heavy metal door. Inside, they found high-end laser cutting tools, blank VIN plates, and printers that could make registration stickers that looked real enough to pass a quick check. On a scratched metal workbench were files with original VIN information that had been taken from cars that had been bought at a salvage yard, as well as ledgers that showed which names would be given to which builds. Not only did they fix up cars, the cars inside had shady pasts, flood-damaged bodies, or frames that had been stolen. They were reborn inside that cage with new names, renamed as clean classics and ready to be auctioned off. With verified matching numbers, they could be sold as rare finds, and people would buy them without question. Federal officials later found that some VINs had been in 3 or 4 states before coming back to Texas with a new name and ready to be sold to the public under the Gas Monkey brand. This shows how organized the operation was. What was even more shocking was hearing from former workers who had been witnesses but had kept quiet for years because they thought what happened in the cage was just normal shop business. One former worker said that he was told to just grind off the old plates and let the new ones do the talking. He thought this was a normal part of the restoration process. Someone else said they saw big cash payments being made after hours, when private collectors bought certain builds without leaving any official records behind. Some of Richard Rawlings' own YouTube films accidentally caught glimpses of this secret operation. In one clip, Richard joked about secret projects we can't show you yet as he led watchers through a late-night shop session. The camera lights caught a corner of the locked door. People thought it was a sneak peek at a new build at the time. Another thing that only Gas Monkey has. Investigators saw the same clip, though, and recognized the keypad entry and reinforced hinges as signs they had seen before in shop photos sent in by informants. It wasn't a small thing either. Later,